People like you always try to sneak into first class." The words cut through the boarding area like a blade, sharp, intentional, loud enough for everyone to hear. Victoria Ashford didn't whisper it. She didn't mumble it under her breath. She said it like policy, like fact, like something she'd been waiting all day to say. Dr. Marcus Williams stood at the podium of Gate B 47 in JFK Terminal 5, his hand frozen over his phone, his boarding pass glowing on the screen. He didn't move. He didn't blink. He just stared at the woman behind the counter who had just decided in less than 3 seconds that he didn't belong. Before we dive in, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. And if this story stops you in your tracks, hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to see how this ends. It was 7:30 on a Tuesday evening. Flight 614 to Houston was oversold by 4 seats. The gate area buzzed with the usual chaos of impatient travelers, crying babies, and the metallic voice of departure announcements echoing overhead. Marcus had been sitting quietly in the priority seating section for 20 minutes, reading a medical journal on his tablet, minding his business, waiting for his boarding group to be called. He was dressed simply: a dark gray hoodie, black joggers, white sneakers that had seen better days. Around his neck hung a pair of expensive noise-canceling headphones. His leather duffel bag sat at his feet, a hospital ID tag, dangling from the handle, Dr. M. Williams Neurosurgery, Mount Memorial Medical Center. But Victoria Ashford didn't see the ID tag. Or, if she did, she didn't care. What she saw was a black man in casual clothes sitting in a section she felt he hadn't earned. And the moment he stood up and walked toward her podium, she had already made her decision. Marcus approached the Sky Priority lane. There was no line yet. The first-class passengers were still milling around, finishing their overpriced airport wine and scrolling through their phones. He was early, relaxed, looking forward to 3 hours of sleep before landing in Houston for his mother's 65th birthday celebration. He smiled politely as he reached the counter. "Good evening. How are you doing tonight?" Victoria didn't smile back. She didn't even look up. Her fingers hovered over her keyboard, her eyes locked on her screen like Marcus was an interruption she hadn't asked for. "Boarding pass." Her voice was flat, cold. The kind of tone that said she'd already categorized him and filed him away under problem. Marcus held out his phone. The screen displayed his mobile boarding pass in crisp digital clarity. Flight 614, Seat 2C, Group 1, Sky Priority. Victoria's eyes flicked to the screen, then to Marcus, then back to the screen. Her perfectly manicured fingers took the phone from his hand, not gently, and she held it up like she was inspecting a counterfeit bill. "This is the priority lane, sir." She said it slowly, carefully, like she was explaining something to a child. "General boarding is in 30 minutes. Zone 5. Marcus blinked. "I know. I'm in seat 2C. That's first class." Victoria's lips pressed into a thin line. She set his phone down on the counter, still not scanning it, still not processing him. Instead, she leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. First class. Right. The skepticism in her voice was a living thing. It hung in the air between them, thick and suffocating. Marcus felt the eyes of the other passengers beginning to turn. The quiet murmur of the gate area shifted. People were watching now. And somewhere in the back row of plastic chairs, sitting alone with a folded copy of the Wall Street Journal and a faded brown bomber jacket, a man in his 60s looked up from his reading and started paying very close attention. Because Harold Mitchell, the CEO of Apex Airlines, had been sitting at Gate B-47 for the last 25 minutes, and he had just watched one of his employees decide that a paying customer didn't deserve respect. What happened next would change everything. Victoria Ashford had been a gate agent for Apex Airlines for 18 years. 18 years of flight delays and passenger complaints and overtime shifts that bled into holidays. 18 years of standing behind the same podium, scanning the same boarding passes, reciting the same safety announcements into the same crackling microphone. She wasn't a manager. She wasn't a supervisor. She had turned down 2 promotions because she didn't want the responsibility of an office or the headache of staff meetings. What she wanted was exactly what she had absolute control over: a 20-foot radius of airport real estate. At Gate B47, Victoria Ashford was God. She adjusted the silk scarf around her neck, making sure the Apex Airlines logo sat perfectly centered against her collarbone. Her navy blazer was tailored expensive, pressed to a knife's edge. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a flawless low bun, not a strand out of place. Designer glasses perched on her nose. Pearl earrings caught the fluorescent light. Red lipstick, perfectly applied, framed a smile she reserved only for passengers she deemed worthy. She looked elegant, polished, classy, like she belonged in a corner office not behind a check-in counter. And she carried herself with the quiet authority of someone who knew exactly how much power she held. To Victoria, the gate wasn't just a job. It was a stage, and she was the director, the casting agent, and the critic all in one. She had a system, a profile. She could spot trouble from 50 feet away. Trouble in Victoria's carefully curated world meant anyone who didn't look like they could afford the ticket they were holding. Anyone whose clothes didn't match the price of their seat. Anyone who looked like they'd gotten lucky with an upgrade or a mistake fare or a frequent flyer loophole. Her eyes scanned the boarding area like a hawk. Businessmen in sharp suits tapping on their phones. Families wrangling toddlers into strollers. A group of college kids laughing too loud by the windows. And there in the back corner, sitting quietly with a book in his lap, was Marcus. She'd noticed him the moment he sat down. He was hard to miss. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark-skinned, wearing a hoodie and joggers like he'd just rolled out of bed. Expensive headphones around his neck. A leather bag that looked real, not fake, but still. He was sitting in the priority seating area, the section reserved for first-class passengers and high-tier elites, and to Victoria, he looked out of place. She leaned toward her assistant, Riley Santos, a 26-year-old woman with nervous eyes and a too-tight smile. Riley had been working at Gate B47 for exactly 3 weeks, and in those 3 weeks she had learned one critical lesson: do not cross Victoria Ashford. "Riley." Victoria's voice was low, conspiratorial. "Keep an eye on that one in the hoodie." Riley glanced over. "He looks fine to me. He's just reading." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "It's always the quiet ones. They think if they don't make eye contact, we won't check their boarding group. Watch. I'm going to make sure he knows who runs this gate." Riley said nothing. She'd already learned that disagreeing with Victoria was a fast track to public humiliation. Victoria turned back to her screen. The flight was oversold. 4 passengers too many. The system was flashing red, demanding she find volunteers to give up their seats in exchange for vouchers and rebooking. But Victoria hated the volunteer process. It was messy, time-consuming. It meant negotiating with passengers, listening to their sob stories, offering compensation. She preferred a cleaner solution. Find a reason to deny boarding. A passport with a bent corner. A carry-on that was half an inch too wide. A tone of voice that could be twisted into aggression. If she could disqualify someone for cause, she didn't have to do the paperwork for a bump. She saved the airline money. In her twisted logic, she was the model employee. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up the passenger manifest. She scrolled through the names looking for an easy target. Someone in first class who didn't have status. Someone who'd probably bought a discounted ticket or used miles. Someone she could justify removing. Seat 2, see Dr. Marcus Williams. Diamond Elite status, frequent flyer since 2019. No flags, no issues, clean record. Victoria frowned. She glanced back at Marcus. He was still reading, oblivious to her scrutiny. She clicked on his profile, digging deeper. Recent flights: New York to Atlanta, Atlanta to Los Angeles, Los Angeles to Boston. All first class, all without incident. She clicked her tongue against her teeth. She couldn't bump him on status, but she could make him work for it. A young mother approached the counter holding a crying baby against her shoulder. "Excuse me, ma'am. Can I just ask if we're boarding by zones or rows? My baby is really fussy, and I saw on the app that families with small children can pre-board." Victoria didn't look up. She kept typing, her fingers slamming the keys with aggressive precision. "Please step back from the podium until your zone is called. You are crowding the area. I just wanted to check because the baby hasn't stopped crying, and I need to get him settled before ma'am." Victoria's voice was ice. "If you do not step back, I will have to tag your carry-on for the hold. Do you want to check your diaper bag?" The young mother's face crumbled. She clutched her child tighter, tears welling in her eyes, and retreated to the plastic chairs without another word. Victoria allowed herself a small, tight smile. This was control. This was power. In her real life, in her cramped apartment in Queens, with a cat that ignored her and an ex-husband who was 4 months behind on alimony, she was invisible. But here at gate B47, she decided who flew and who stayed grounded. She turned her attention back to Marcus. He had stood up now, stretching, checking his watch, a heavy silver timepiece that caught the overhead lights. He picked up his duffel bag, slinging it over his shoulder, and began walking toward the podium. Victoria straightened in her chair. She smoothed her blazer. She adjusted her glasses. "Let's see what you've got, Doctor." Riley sensed the shift in energy. She glanced at Victoria, then at Marcus, then back at Victoria. "Should I start boarding?" "Not yet." Victoria's eyes didn't leave Marcus. "I want to make sure everyone's credentials are in order first." Marcus reached the Sky Priority lane. He pulled out his phone, queued up his boarding pass, and smiled at Victoria with the kind of tired politeness that came from years of flying. "Good evening. How are you doing tonight?" Victoria stared at him. She let the silence stretch. She let him stand there, waiting, smile fading until the discomfort settled in. Then she spoke. Boarding pass, and the confrontation began. Dr. Marcus Williams was exhausted. The kind of exhausted that lived deep in his bones, the kind that sleep couldn't fix because it wasn't just physical, it was mental, emotional. The exhaustion of a man who had spent the last 40 hours keeping people alive. He had just finished a double shift at Mount Memorial Medical Center, 2 emergency surgeries back-to-back, a subdural hematoma in a 19-year-old car accident victim, a brain tumor resection in a 52-year-old mother of 3, both successful, both alive, both going home to their families because Marcus had steady hands and 15 years of training and a refusal to let death win. After the second surgery, he'd scrubbed out, changed into street clothes, and taken a cab straight to JFK. No time to go home. No time to shower. Just a quick stop at the hospital locker room to grab his bag and his headphones and the medical journal he'd been meaning to finish for 2 weeks. He was flying to Houston for his mother's 65th birthday. Gloria Williams, retired teacher, raised 3 kids on her own after Marcus's father died when Marcus was 12. Worked 2 jobs to put Marcus through college, then med school, then his residency. Never missed a recital. Never missed a game. Never let Marcus believe for 1 second that he couldn't be anything he wanted to be. And tomorrow at noon in the backyard of the house Marcus grew up in, she was throwing herself a party. She'd invited half the neighborhood. She'd made Marcus promise 3 months ago that he'd be there. Front row, no excuses. So he booked the last direct flight out of JFK, seat 2C, first class. Not because he needed the luxury, but because he needed the sleep. 3 hours of uninterrupted rest before landing and diving straight into family chaos. That was the plan. But plans had a way of unraveling when you looked a certain way. Marcus had lived 38 years as a black man in America. 38 years of being followed in stores. 38 years of having his ID checked twice. 38 years of being asked if he was sure he was in the right place, the right neighborhood, the right tax bracket. He'd learned early on that anger didn't help. Outrage didn't help. The only thing that helped was composure. Stay calm. Stay polite. Let them reveal themselves. Let the truth do the work. He thought about the first time it happened. He was 23, fresh out of undergrad, on his way to a medical conference in Miami. He'd booked a boutique hotel near South Beach, paid in full, had a confirmation email on his phone. But when he walked into the lobby, dressed in a hoodie and jeans after a red-eye flight, the man at the front desk looked him up and down and said, "You don't look like someone who'd stay here." Marcus had pulled up his confirmation. The man shook his head. "System's down. Come back when the manager's around." Marcus slept in his rental car that night, woke up with a stiff neck and a decision. He wasn't going to let this happen again, not to him, not to anyone. That morning, sitting in the parking lot with the sun rising over the Atlantic, he started outlining a business plan, a way to track discrimination in the hospitality industry, a platform where people could report incidents, where patterns could be identified, where accountability could be demanded. It took him years to build. He partnered with a tech startup, launched a pilot program, worked with civil rights organizations, and eventually the platform grew into something real, something that helped people fight back. But even with all that, even with the advocacy work and the network and the resources, Marcus still found himself standing at airport gates being looked at like he didn't belong. He checked his watch. 7:32 p.m. Boarding started in 13 minutes. He'd get on the plane, sleep for 3 hours, wake up in Houston, and hug his mother. Simple. Except Victoria Ashford had other plans. Marcus approached the counter with his phone in hand. He wasn't nervous. He'd done this 1,000 times. Sky Priority, Diamond Elite. First class. It was routine. "Good evening. How are you doing tonight?" Victoria didn't respond. She stared at his phone like it was a foreign object. "Boarding pass." Marcus held it out. She took it not gently and held it up to the light like she was checking for forgery. "This is the priority lane, sir. General boarding is in 30 minutes, Zone 5. Marcus's stomach tightened. He knew this tone. He knew this look. He'd seen it before. In hotel lobbies, in restaurants, in hospital waiting rooms when he showed up in street clothes instead of scrubs. "I know. I'm in seat 2C. That's first class." Victoria's lips curled. First class? Right. Marcus didn't argue. Not yet. He waited. He watched her set his phone down without scanning it. Watched her cross her arms. Watched her lean back like she had all the time in the world. And in that moment, Marcus made a choice. He wasn't going to walk away. He wasn't going to ask for a supervisor. He was going to stand here calmly and let Victoria show the world exactly who she was. Because somewhere, someone was watching. Someone was recording. Someone was paying attention. Marcus didn't know that the someone was the CEO of the entire airline, sitting 10 feet away in a bomber jacket and reading glasses, looking like a retired grandfather heading south for vacation. But he was about to find out. Victoria picked up his phone again. She squinted at the screen. Then she looked up at him, her eyes cold and sharp. "I'm going to need to see your ID." Marcus sighed. "Here we go. My ID." Marcus kept his voice even. "I already went through TSA. I showed them my ID there." Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes. "And I'm asking to see it again. Random identity verification check. Company policy." She crossed her arms, the silk scarf around her neck shifting slightly. Her red lips pressed into a tight line. "Unless you don't have it." Marcus closed his eyes for half a second. He knew what this was. He'd lived this script before. The extra scrutiny, the additional hoops. The unspoken message, prove you belong. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out his wallet. A simple black leather billfold worn at the edges from years of use. He extracted his driver's license and handed it to Victoria. She took it between two fingers, holding it like it might contaminate her. She held it up to the overhead light. She squinted at the photo. She bent the card, slightly testing its flexibility, checking for forgery. This photo looks younger. It was taken 4 years ago. Marcus's voice was calm, controlled. People age, ma'am. The flight starts boarding in a few minutes. Is there a problem? Victoria didn't answer. She kept examining the license, turning it over, running her thumb across the holographic state seal. Around them, the boarding area had started to fill. Passengers gathered near the podium, checking their phones, adjusting their bags, waiting for their zones to be called. The problem, Victoria said, her voice rising just enough to carry, is that we take security very seriously here. And when things don't match up, we ask questions. Heads began to turn. A businessman in the front row looked up from his laptop. A couple near the windows stopped their conversation mid-sentence. The young mother with the crying baby paused her rocking and glanced over. What doesn't match up? Marcus stepped closer to the counter, careful to keep his hands visible, his posture non-threatening. The name is the same. The face is the same. I have a valid ticket. Victoria handed the license back, but she didn't scan the phone. Instead, she turned to her computer and started typing. Her fingers flew across the keyboard with exaggerated aggression, each keystroke a small act of defiance. I'm going to need you to step aside, sir. Step aside. Marcus's composure cracked slightly. Why? Because I need to clear your ticket status. The system is flagging it. Flagging it for what, sir? Victoria's voice snapped like a whip. I am asking you to step aside so I can board the other passengers. If you continue to be aggressive, I will have to call security. Marcus blinked. Aggressive? He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't moved toward her. He was standing with his hands at his sides, his duffel bag on the floor, his boarding pass still unscanned on the counter. I am not being aggressive. Marcus's voice was firm but level. I am asking for clarification. I paid for this seat. I am a frequent flyer. I want to know why I am being denied boarding. You aren't being denied boarding yet. Victoria's eyes gleamed. You are being processed. Now step aside. Marcus looked around. He saw the eyes of the other passengers. Some looked sympathetic. Some looked annoyed. Annoyed that he was holding up their flight. Annoyed that he wasn't just doing what the gate agent said. He saw the judgment. Why is he arguing? Just do what she says. Stop making a scene. Marcus took a deep breath. He knew the game. If he escalated, he lost. If he got angry, he became the stereotype Victoria wanted him to be. The aggressive black man, the troublemaker, the security threat. Fine. Marcus picked up his duffel bag and moved 3 feet to the left, standing beside the metal podium support. I'll wait. But I expect this to be resolved quickly. Victoria ignored him. She picked up the microphone, her voice suddenly warm and welcoming, a complete shift from the ice she'd been hurling at Marcus. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are now inviting our first-class passengers and Diamond Elite members to board through the Sky Priority Lane. Welcome aboard Flight 614 to Houston. Marcus watched as a man in a tailored suit walked up to the counter. Victoria beamed at him. Welcome back, Mr. Henderson. Seat 3B. Have a wonderful flight. Beep. She scanned his boarding pass without hesitation. He walked onto the jetway, barely breaking stride. Next came a couple holding matching leather carry-ons. Victoria smiled at them like old friends. Enjoy Houston, folks. Beep, beep. They disappeared down the jetway. Marcus stood there. A humiliating spectacle. Effectively put in timeout, while passengers who had arrived after him, who had less status than him, who hadn't been questioned or doubted, walked onto the plane without a second glance. He checked his watch. 7:42 p.m. 12 minutes until scheduled departure. His chest tightened. He thought about his mother, the party, the promise he'd made, front row, no excuses. Riley Santos, Victoria's assistant, stood at the jetway door, scanning boarding passes and directing passengers. She glanced at Marcus once her eyes filled with something that looked like sympathy, but she said nothing. She kept her head down and did her job. 10 minutes passed. The first-class line emptied. Zone 1 boarded. Zone 2 boarded. Marcus stood there invisible, erased, while the gate agent, who had decided he didn't belong, processed everyone else. Finally, the line lulled. The stream of passengers slowed to a trickle. Marcus stepped back up to the counter. "Ma'am." His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it now, sharp and undeniable. "Everyone from priority has boarded. Can you check my status now?" Victoria didn't look up from her screen. "I'm busy, sir. I have a flight to manage. You are managing the flight by boarding passengers. I am a passenger. I told you." Victoria's fingers stopped typing. She turned her body fully toward him, her eyes cold and reptilian behind her designer glasses. "Your ticket is flagged. Then call a supervisor." Marcus's patience was fraying at the edges. "If there's a technical error, let's get someone over here to fix it." Victoria stopped. She set her hands flat on the counter. She leaned forward, invading the space between them, her voice dropping to an icy whisper. "You know what? I don't like your tone. I have been very patient with you, but you have been hovering over me, disrupting my workspace and intimidating my colleague." Riley, standing at the door, looked down at her shoes. She couldn't meet Marcus's eyes. "I haven't said a word to your colleague." Marcus's voice was incredulous. "I haven't raised my voice. I haven't moved toward you. What exactly am I doing that's intimidating?" Victoria picked up the phone on her desk. Her smile was thin and cruel. "You are making us feel unsafe. I'm marking you as a refusal to transport due to unruly behavior. You aren't getting on this flight. You can go to the customer service desk in Terminal 2 and try to rebook for tomorrow." Marcus felt the anger ignite in his chest. A hot, sharp spark that threatened to explode. "You have got to be kidding me. I have patients waiting for me in Houston. My mother's party is tomorrow. You cannot kick me off a flight because of my tone when you are the one being rude. I am the lead agent here." Victoria's voice rose performative, designed to be heard. "And I say you're too aggressive to fly. Now get your bag and walk away before I have you escorted out in handcuffs." The gate area went dead silent. It was in that silence that a voice came from the row of seats directly behind the podium. A calm, gravelly voice that cut through the tension like a scalpel. "I've been sitting here for 25 minutes. He hasn't raised his voice once." Victoria's head snapped up. Sitting in the second row of plastic chairs directly behind the podium was a man in his early 60s, salt and pepper hair, reading glasses perched on his nose, a faded brown bomber jacket that had seen better days zipped halfway up over a plain white t-shirt, jeans that were clean but worn, old sneakers scuffed at the toes, a copy of the Wall Street Journal folded neatly in his lap. He looked like a retired grandfather. The kind of man you'd see at a hardware store on a Saturday morning buying screws and asking the cashier about their grandkids. Unremarkable, invisible, exactly the kind of person people overlooked. But Harold Mitchell was not unremarkable. He was the CEO of Apex Airlines, and he had been sitting at Gate B47 for the last 25 minutes watching everything. This was something Harold did 4 times a year. No announcement, no warning, no entourage of assistants or security. He'd pick a random airport, a random gate dress like a civilian, and sit. Watch. Listen. See how his employees treated passengers when they thought no one important was watching. He called it ground truth. His board called it a liability. His lawyers called it a lawsuit waiting to happen. But Harold didn't care. He'd built Apex Airlines from 3 planes and a dream into one of the top 5 carriers in the country, and he'd done it by knowing his business from the ground up. He'd been at Gate B-47 since 7:05 p.m. He'd watched Victoria deny a young mother the courtesy of pre-boarding. Watched her belittle a college student who'd asked a simple question about overhead bin space. Watched her profile Marcus the moment he stood up. Harold had seen the look in Victoria's eyes when Marcus approached. The narrowing. The coldness. The decision made before a single word was spoken. He'd thought about intervening immediately. Walked up to the counter, flashed his ID, shut the whole thing down before it escalated. But he'd held back, because he needed to see how deep this went. He needed to know if Victoria would stop on her own, if Riley would speak up, if anyone would do the right thing without a CEO forcing their hand. No one did. So Harold sat. He folded his newspaper. He took off his reading glasses and tucked them into his jacket pocket. And when Victoria threatened to have Marcus escorted out in handcuffs, Harold decided he'd seen enough. He stood up slowly. His knees cracked. His back protested. 61 years of life. 30 of them spent flying commercial planes before he'd moved into management, had left him with the aches of a man who'd worked hard for everything. "Excuse me." Victoria's voice was sharp, defensive. "Sir, this is a security matter. Please mind your own business." Harold walked toward the podium. He didn't rush, didn't shout. He moved with the calm authority of a man who had spent decades commanding cockpits and boardrooms and shareholder meetings. "It becomes my business when I see a paying customer being harassed." Victoria's face flushed red. "I am not harassing him. He is a security threat." Harold gestured toward Marcus's duffel bag. The hospital ID tag dangled clearly from the handle. "He's a neurosurgeon, Mount Memorial Medical Staff, and I've been sitting here for 25 minutes. The only aggression I've seen is coming from behind that counter." Victoria was shaking now. Her hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the podium. She felt her authority slipping, the walls of her kingdom cracking. "That's it." She grabbed the walkie-talkie clipped to her belt. "I'm calling airport police. You're both not flying. I'm closing the flight." She looked at Marcus with a look of pure malice. "I hope you enjoy the bus, Doctor." Marcus looked at the older man. "Sir, you don't have to get involved. I don't want you to miss your flight, too." Harold smiled. It was a sad smile. Tired. But there was steel underneath. "Don't worry, son. This plane isn't going anywhere until we sort this out." He stepped closer to the counter standing right next to Marcus. Shoulder to shoulder. 2 men strangers 5 minutes ago united by the absurdity of the moment. "Who do you think you are?" Victoria laughed, a high-pitched, nervous sound. "You think you can just walk up here and tell me how to do my job?" Harold reached into the inside pocket of his bomber jacket. Victoria flinched, her hand moving instinctively toward the phone, perhaps thinking he was reaching for a weapon. But Harold pulled out a simple black leather lanyard. An ID card hung from it encased in clear plastic. He didn't show it to her yet. He just held it in his hand, letting the moment stretch. "My name is Harold Mitchell." Victoria rolled her eyes. "Good for you, Harold. I don't care if you're the president. Back away from my counter." Harold sighed. He looked past Victoria to Riley, who was standing at the jetway door, trembling, her eyes wide. "Riley." Harold's voice was gentle. "On your terminal type in the employee override code, Alpha Delta 01. Victoria froze. The color drained from her face like water from a shattered glass. That wasn't just a supervisor code. That was an executive override, the kind of code only 3 people in the entire company had access to. The CEO, the COO, and the director of security. "Patty, don't you touch that keyboard." Victoria's voice cracked. She spun toward Riley, panic flashing in her eyes. Riley. Harold's voice remained calm. Type it in. Riley's hands were shaking. She looked at Victoria, then at Harold, then at the keyboard in front of her. She took a breath, made a choice, and typed a D01. The screens above the gate, the giant LED monitors that usually displayed flight information and boarding updates, went black. For 3 seconds, the entire gate area stared at them confused. Then, a single line of text appeared in bright amber letters. System lock. CEO access detected. Victoria turned slowly. She looked at the screen, then back at Harold, then at the ID card he was holding. Harold Mitchell flipped the card around. The photo matched. The name matched. The title was printed in bold letters beneath his face. Chief Executive Officer, Apex Airlines. Now Victoria. Harold's voice dropped to a terrifyingly polite whisper. Let's talk about security. For 10 seconds, the world inside Terminal 5 seemed to stop spinning. The amber text on the overhead monitors pulsed slowly, casting a sickly yellow glow over Victoria's stunned face. System lock. CEO access detected. The words repeated over and over like a heartbeat. Victoria stared at the ID card in Harold's hand. She read the name, looked at the photo, looked at the man standing in front of her. The jawline was softer now, the hair grayer, but the eyes, those sharp, uncompromising gray eyes, were unmistakable. But the human brain is a stubborn thing. When confronted with a reality that destroys its entire foundation, it will often reject the evidence rather than accept the collapse. Victoria Ashford had built her identity on being the ultimate authority at Gate B47. The idea that she had just threatened to arrest the owner of the company was too catastrophic to process. So she didn't. Instead, she laughed. It was a wet, jagged sound, part disbelief, part desperation. Nice try. Her voice wavered. That's a good fake. Where did you get it? Online? Did you print that yourself? Harold didn't blink. He lowered the ID but didn't put it away. He looked at her with a mixture of pity and profound disappointment. Victoria, look at your screen. Look at the override code. Only 3 people in this company have that clearance level. Me, the COO, and the Director of Security. Do you really think a fake ID hacked your terminal? You probably used a jammer. Victoria was grasping now, her hands flying across the keyboard, slamming keys. Escape. Control-Alt-Delete. Anything to clear the screen and regain her power. She grabbed her walkie-talkie. Riley, call it. Tell them we're being cyber-attacked. These 2 are working together. Riley stood frozen at the jetway door. Her face had gone pale. She knew who Harold Mitchell was. She'd seen his picture in the new hire orientation video 3 weeks ago. She'd watched the town hall webcast where he'd announced the new profit-sharing program for ground staff. Brenda. Riley's voice was barely a whisper. Stop. That's him. That's Mr. Mitchell. I saw him on the webcast last month. Shut up, Riley. Victoria spun around, her face twisted with rage. The vein in her neck was bulging. You're an idiot. He's a con artist. They try this all the time to get free upgrades. She turned back to Marcus and Harold, pointing a shaking finger at them. You think you're smart? You think you can intimidate me? I am the safety compliance officer for this gate. My word is law, and I am telling you neither of you is getting on this plane. Dr. Marcus Williams watched this meltdown with a sinking feeling in his gut. He had seen this behavior before, in the hospital. Surgeons who made a fatal error and refused to admit it, doubling down, digging deeper, protecting the ego until the patient was dead. Mr. Mitchell, Marcus leaned in slightly, his voice low. Maybe we should just let the police handle this. She's not rational right now. Harold shook his head. No, doctor. I need to see this. I need to see exactly how deep the rot goes. He took a step closer to the podium. He placed his hands flat on the counter, invading Victoria's sacred space. Victoria. Harold's voice was calm, but it carried across the gate area like a gavel. I am going to give you one chance. One chance to save your pension. Apologize to Dr. Williams, process his ticket, and admit that you profiled him based on his appearance. The crowd held its breath. Phones were raised. Recording. The live streams had already started. Brandon Cole, the businessman who'd been watching from the beginning, had his camera pointed directly at the podium. Sophie Martinez, the travel vlogger, was whispering rapid-fire commentary into her phone. This is happening live at JFK Gate B47. A gate agent just tried to kick off a passenger, and the CEO of the airline walked up behind her. This is insane. Victoria looked at the crowd. She saw the phones. She saw the judgment. She saw the smirks. The walls were closing in. The kingdom was collapsing. But in her mind, apologizing was worse than being fired. Apologizing was admitting she was wrong, admitting she was small. I followed protocol. The words came out like venom. He looked suspicious. He had no luggage tags. He was loitering. And you, she jabbed a finger at Harold, are interfering with federal aviation operations. She grabbed the desk phone. I'm not just calling airport police. I'm calling the FBI. I'm reporting a hijacking threat. Harold's eyes widened. Victoria put the phone down. Do not make a false report. Watch me. She dialed. Not the internal security line. Not the airport operations desk. She dialed 911. Emergency. Her voice pitched up 2 octaves, sliding into a performance of panic. This is Apex Airlines Gate B47. I have 2 men attempting to breach security. They are aggressive. They are threatening staff. They have weapons. Send backup. Send SWAT. She slammed the phone down. Looked at Marcus and Harold with a triumphant manic grin. Now let's see whose ID works when there's a gun in your face. The silence that followed was suffocating. Even the baby in the back row had stopped crying. The gate area had gone from tense to terrified. Passengers backed away from the podium. Some grabbed their bags ready to run. Marcus looked at Harold. She just said we have weapons. She just swatted us. Harold Mitchell's face hardened. The sadness was gone, replaced by the cold, calculated fury of a man who had spent 30 years building a company and would not let one person destroy it. Riley. Harold's voice was crisp, sharp. Get on the PA system. Me? Riley squeaked. Yes. Pick up the mic. Announce that Flight 614 is indefinitely delayed due to a personnel issue. Tell the passengers that anyone who wishes to rebook will receive a full refund plus a $2,000 voucher. Then open the jetway door and ask the captain to come out here immediately. You can't give orders here. Victoria lunged for the microphone, but Harold was faster. He slammed his hand down on the counter. The sound was like a thunderclap. Sit down. The command was so absolute, so authoritative that Victoria's knees buckled. She slumped into the swivel chair behind the desk, breathing heavily, her eyes darting around the terminal like a trapped animal. You're finished. She was rocking back and forth now, whispering to herself. They're coming. You're both going to jail. The FBI doesn't play games. Harold adjusted his bomber jacket. He turned to Marcus. Doctor, I am so sorry. I wanted to see how she treated customers. But I never imagined she would endanger lives by calling in a fake terrorist threat. It's not your fault. Marcus's heart was hammering against his ribs. He knew what happened when police responded to reports of aggressive black men. He knew the statistics. He took a slow breath, centering himself. But when they get here, let me do the talking. Or you. Just let's make sure no one gets hurt. I won't let them touch you. Harold's voice was a promise. From the long hallway of Terminal 5, the sound of heavy boots hitting the floor began to echo, growing louder, accompanied by the jingle of utility belts, the crackle of radios. Victoria straightened in her chair. She fixed her hair. She composed her face into a mask of terrified innocence. "Here comes the cavalry." She whispered it like a prayer, but she had no idea which direction the consequences were coming from. The response was massive. Because Victoria had used the words breach and weapons, it wasn't just a couple of beat cops with tasers and clipboards. It was a full tactical team. 6 officers from the Port Authority Police Department sprinted down the concourse, their boots pounding the polished floor in perfect rhythm. They were flanked by a K9 unit, a German shepherd straining against its leash teeth bared, trained to detect explosives and attack on command. Behind them, passengers scattered. Families pressed themselves against the glass windows, children clutching their parents' legs. A woman screamed. A man dropped his coffee, the liquid spreading across the floor in a dark pool. "Hands? Let me see your hands." The lead officer bellowed as the team rounded the corner to gate B47. He had his hand on his holster, the safety strap undone, his finger resting just above the trigger. His name was Sergeant Jake Morrison, a 15-year veteran of the PAPD, a man who had responded to bomb threats and active shooters and every nightmare scenario the post-9/11 airport world could conjure. Dr. Marcus Williams instinctively raised his hands. He spread his fingers wide, palms forward, every movement slow and deliberate. It was muscle memory, born of survival, born of watching too many news reports of men who looked like him being shot for reaching too fast, moving too sudden, existing too threateningly. "I am unarmed." His voice was clear, steady, loud enough to carry over the chaos. "I am a doctor. I am not a threat." He went to his knees, slowly, carefully. His duffel bag slid off his shoulder and landed on the floor beside him. He kept his hands raised, kept his eyes forward, kept breathing. Harold Mitchell did not kneel. He stood his ground. His hands were visible down at his sides, but he didn't raise them. He didn't drop. He looked annoyed, like a man whose dinner reservation had been canceled, like a man who had been interrupted in the middle of something important. "Get on the ground," Morrison screamed at Harold. "Now! Face down! Officer!" Harold's voice boomed over the chaos, calm and commanding. "My name is Harold Mitchell. I am the CEO of this airline. Stand down." Morrison hesitated for a fraction of a second, but the adrenaline was too high. The K9 was barking. The backup officers were fanning out, covering angles, shouting commands. This was a federal airport, a potential hijacking. The protocol was clear. "I don't care who you are. Down, now." 2 officers rushed forward, reaching for Harold's arms, ready to tackle him to the ground. "Wait." A voice cracked like a whip from the jetway door. Captain Elena Ruiz stepped out onto the gate floor. She was wearing her full pilot uniform, 4 stripes on her shoulders, wings on her chest, her cap squared perfectly on her head. She was 38 years old, had been flying commercial jets for 12 years, and had just been summoned from the cockpit by Riley Santos with a frantic message, "The CEO is at the gate and the police are here and I don't know what's happening." Elena had sprinted down the jetway, and now she stood there taking in the scene in an instant. Her boss, the man who signed her paychecks, about to be tackled by 2 cops. A black man in a hoodie on his knees with his hands up, and Victoria Ashford, sitting behind the podium with a look of smug satisfaction on her face. "Sergeant Morrison." Elena's voice cut through the noise. She knew the cop. They played on the same airport softball league, Tuesday nights at the field behind Terminal 4. Morrison was a decent guy, a good cop. But right now, he was about to make a catastrophic mistake. "Stand down. That is the CEO. That is Harold Mitchell." Morrison froze. His hand was inches from Harold's shoulder. He looked at the pilot. then back at Harold. He squinted. The recognition dawned slowly like a sunrise breaking through fog. He'd seen this man before, 2 months ago, at the Port Authority Charity Gala. Harold had been the keynote speaker, had written a check for $75,000 to the Widows and Orphans Fund. Morrison had shaken his hand, thanked him, called him sir. Morrison signaled his team to hold. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut. Captain Ruiz Morrison's voice was still hard, still tactical, but doubt had crept in. "We got a 911 call. Active hijackers. Weapons. 2 suspects at this gate. There are no hijackers." Elena walked over to Marcus and extended her hand. She helped him up from the floor, her grip firm and steady. She dusted off his hoodie with surprising gentleness. "Are you all right, sir?" Marcus nodded. He couldn't speak yet. His throat was too tight. "There are no weapons." Elena turned to Morrison, her voice steady and authoritative. "What we have is a massive failure of judgment by the gate agent." Morrison turned his gaze to Victoria. She was still sitting behind the podium, but the smugness was evaporating now, replaced by a pale, sickly dread. She called it in. Morrison pointed at Victoria. "She said 2 men were breaching the cockpit. She said they had weapons." Harold Mitchell stepped forward. He brushed off his bomber jacket, straightened his collar, and looked at Morrison with the calm authority of a man who had commanded rooms full of people far more powerful than a police sergeant. "Officer I was conducting a spot check on my staff. This agent, Miss Ashford, denied this passenger boarding based on racial profiling. When I intervened and revealed my identity, she panicked and made a false report to cover her actions." Morrison turned to Victoria. His expression shifted, from tactical aggression to cold, simmering anger. "Police officers hate false calls. False calls put them in danger. False calls waste resources. False calls get people killed. Is that true, ma'am?" Morrison walked toward the podium, his boots heavy on the floor. "Did you report a weapon when there wasn't one?" Victoria's mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. I felt threatened. Morrison leaned over the counter. His voice was low. "Dangerous. Feeling threatened and seeing a weapon are 2 very different things in the eyes of the law. One is a complaint. The other is a felony." Victoria shrank back in her chair. "I just wanted them removed. You have to understand the pressure. The oversold flight. The delays. I was trying to protect the passengers." By lying about a gun, Morrison's jaw tightened. "Ma'am, do you understand what you just did? You pulled 6 armed officers away from actual security threats. You put a K-9 unit on high alert. You caused a panic in a crowded terminal. And you made us draw down on 2 unarmed men, one of whom is on his knees because you decided to play God. I didn't mean—" "You are relieved of duty." Harold Mitchell's voice cut through Victoria's stammering like a blade. "Effective immediately. You are banned from Apex Airlines property. Now do as the officer says." Victoria looked at Riley. Her eyes were wild, pleading. "Riley, tell them. Tell them how scary they were, how aggressive. You saw it. You were right there." Riley Santos stood at the jetway door. She looked at Victoria. She thought about the last 3 weeks. The bullying. The snide comments about her accent, her clothes, her weight. The way Victoria had made her cry in the break room on her second day because she'd forgotten to announce a gate change. The way Victoria had stolen credit for Riley's idea to reorganize the boarding process. Riley thought about all of it. And then she spoke. "They weren't scary, Victoria." Her voice was clear, strong. The gentleman in the hoodie was polite. He asked why he couldn't board. "You yelled at him, and, Mr. Mitchell just asked you to apologize. That's all. You chose to escalate." You traitorous little Victoria lunged out of her chair, her hand reaching for Riley. fingers curled into claws. Officer Rodriguez, a female officer who had circled around the back of the podium, caught Victoria's arm mid-lunge. She spun Victoria around with practiced efficiency, pulling her arm behind her back. "That's enough." Rodriguez's voice was calm, professional. She'd done this 1,000 times. "Victoria Ashford, you are under arrest for filing a false police report and misuse of the 911 emergency system. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." The click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound in the airport. "No." Victoria's voice cracked. "You can't do this. I know my rights. I'm union. I want my rep. This is discrimination. You're arresting me because I'm a woman." Rodriguez didn't respond. She just guided Victoria out from behind the podium, one hand on her elbow, the other on the cuffs. As they walked her past the seating area, something unexpected happened. Someone started clapping. Slow at first, a single person, then another, and then the entire gate erupted in applause. It wasn't polite, it wasn't restrained, it was thunderous. People stood up. They cheered. They whistled. A man in the back row shouted, "Finally! She's been terrorizing this gate for years." The young mother with the baby, the one Victoria had humiliated earlier, waved as Victoria passed. Her smile was wide and genuine. Victoria looked at the faces around her. Passengers she had turned away. Travelers she had belittled. People she had made feel small for 18 years. And there was no sympathy in their eyes, no pity, only relief. Dr. Marcus Williams watched her go. He felt a strange mix of emotions swirling in his chest. Justice, yes. Vindication, absolutely. But also a profound sadness. A woman had destroyed her own life rather than simply say 3 words, "I was wrong." Harold Mitchell walked over to Marcus. He extended his hand. "Dr. Williams, I cannot apologize enough. This is not who we are. This is not who we want to be." Marcus shook the hand. It was firm, steady, the handshake of a man who meant what he said. "Mr. Mitchell, you stood up when you didn't have to. You put yourself in the line of fire. I respect that." Harold turned to the cluster of gate agents who were now swarming the desk from neighboring gates, scrambling to cover the sudden vacancy. "Get Dr. Williams his boarding pass." Harold's voice was crisp, commanding. "Upgrade him. If 2C is his seat, give him the entire row, and comp his ticket. Full refund. That's not necessary." Marcus held up a hand. "It is," Harold insisted. "But we're not done yet. The police part is over. But the real work, the hard work, is just beginning." Harold turned to Riley Santos, who was still standing by the jetway door, her hands shaking slightly from the adrenaline. "Riley. What's your full name, Riley Santos, sir? How long have you been with Apex? 3 weeks? Harold nodded. "As of this moment, you are the interim lead agent for Gate B47, effective immediately. Your pay doubles. And I want you to know something. What you did just now, telling the truth when it would have been easier to lie, that's the kind of integrity this company needs." Riley's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, sir. I won't let you down. I know you won't." Harold turned back to the crowd. The passengers were still standing, still watching, still recording. He saw the phones, saw the live streams, saw the future unfolding in real time. "Captain Ruiz." Harold gestured to the pilot. "How long until this flight can depart?" Elena checked her watch. "If we board in the next 10 minutes, we can still make our slot. Ground crew is standing by." "Good." Harold turned to the gate agents. "Let's board this flight, and let's do it right." But before the agents could move, a man in a sharp suit stepped forward from the crowd. He looked nervous. His phone was in his hand, the screen glowing. "Excuse me, Mr. Mitchell?" Harold turned. Yes. My name is Brandon Cole. I'm a social media manager for a tech startup. I recorded the whole thing. From the moment she took Dr. Williams' ID to the moment the handcuffs went on, all 18 minutes. It's on my phone. Harold looked at the phone, then at Marcus, then back at Brandon. What's your name again, son, Brandon? Brandon Cole. Harold reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. Simple, white, embossed letters. Harold Mitchell, CEO, Apex Airlines. A phone number, an email address. Nothing else. Brandon, don't post that yet. Send it to me. We're going to need it. Need it for what? Evidence. Harold's voice was dark. Victoria isn't going to go quietly. She's going to fight. She's going to hire a lawyer. She's going to sue for wrongful termination, defamation, emotional distress. She's going to play the victim, and when she does, we need to be ready. Brandon nodded. I'll send it tonight. Another voice spoke up, a young woman with a camera rig and a microphone. Sophie Martinez, travel vlogger, 200,000 subscribers on YouTube. Mr. Mitchell, I got a different angle. From the side, you can see her facial expressions. The moment she decided to lie to 911. It's clear as day. Harold smiled, a small, grim smile. Send that too. He turned to Marcus. Ready to go, Doctor. Marcus blinked. Go where I thought I was boarding. You are. Just not on this flight. Harold gestured toward the terminal windows where the lights of the runway stretched out into the darkness. My private jet is in the hangar. We're going to Dallas. Headquarters. I want you to tell the board of directors exactly what happened here tonight. Marcus hesitated. What about Houston? My mother's party is tomorrow at noon. I'll have you in Houston by morning. I promise. Harold's voice was steady. But tonight we clean house. Tonight we make sure this never happens again. Marcus looked at the gate, at the empty podium where Victoria had stood, at the passengers who were watching him with something that looked like awe. Okay, let's go to Dallas. They gathered their things. Harold slung his newspaper under his arm. Marcus picked up his duffel bag, and together they walked toward the exit flanked by Captain Ruiz and Riley Santos. As they moved through the terminal, people recognized them. Not from real life, from the live streams that were already going viral. Hashtag Victoria Ashford was trending on Twitter. Hashtag Apex Accountability was climbing the charts. The videos had been shared 10,000 times in 30 minutes. A woman in a wheelchair rolled up to them as they passed. She didn't say anything. She just nodded, deeply, a gesture of respect, of gratitude. A black father with 2 young kids stepped forward. He extended his hand to Marcus. You didn't just stand your ground, brother. The man's voice was thick with emotion. You lifted something off all our backs. Marcus shook the hand. He didn't trust himself to speak. They reached the private terminal. Harold's assistant, Nina Patel, a sharp-eyed woman in her early 30s, was waiting with a tablet and a leather briefcase. Sir, Nina's voice was crisp. The video is already trending. 2.4 million views in 90 minutes. CNN called. MSNBC called. Fox News called. They all want statements. No statements yet. Harold took the tablet, scrolled through the analytics. Not until we've talked to the board. They're not going to like this. I don't care. Harold handed the tablet back. Set up an emergency meeting. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. I want every board member in that room, no exceptions. Yes, sir. Harold turned to Marcus. They walked toward the hangar where the private jet waited, its engines already warming up. Dr. Williams, I need to be honest with you. Harold's voice was quieter now. More personal. I've suspected Victoria for 8 months. Received 14 complaints. Passengers saying she profiled them, treated them differently, made them feel unwelcome. But HR kept saying no concrete evidence. Union protections. He said, she said, I couldn't fire her without proof. So you used me as bait. Marcus's voice was flat. Harold stopped walking. He turned to face Marcus, his eyes steady. I did, and I apologize. I should have intervened the moment she took your ID, but I needed to see how far she'd go. I needed evidence that would stand up in court, in arbitration, in the press, and now we have it. Marcus looked at him for a long moment. Then he nodded. Just make sure it counts. It will. They boarded the jet. Leather seats, polished wood. A flight attendant offered them drinks. Marcus declined. Harold asked for coffee. As the plane taxied toward the runway, Nina pulled up the latest numbers on her tablet. Sir, the board is going to try to contain this quietly. Settle with Victoria. Bury the story. Protect the brand. Harold looked out the window at the lights of New York falling away below them. Let them try. He said it quietly. But this time the whole world is watching. The Queen's central booking facility smelled like bleach and stale despair. Victoria Ashford sat on a cold metal bench in a holding cell. Her blazer wrinkled, her scarf confiscated, her red lipstick smeared across her cheek. She had been there for 6 hours. At first, she'd been defiant, demanded her phone call, demanded her union rep, demanded to speak to a supervisor. But the officers had just processed her like every other arrestee. Fingerprints, mugshot, property inventory, her designer glasses confiscated, her pearl earrings confiscated, her belt, her scarf, her dignity confiscated. By the time her union representative arrived, a tired-looking man named Frank Rodriguez Victoria had moved past defiance into strategy. Frank. She grabbed his arm as he approached the cell. You have to get me out of here. This is a setup. That man, Harold Mitchell, he orchestrated this whole thing. He's trying to silence me because I was going to report safety violations. Frank sighed. He'd heard this song before. Victoria, they have you on video. 18 minutes of uncut footage, and you called 911 and reported weapons that didn't exist. That's a crime. I felt threatened. Feeling threatened and lying to emergency services are two different things. Frank opened his briefcase, pulled out a folder. The DA is offering a deal. Plead guilty to misdemeanor false reporting. 6 months probation. Community service. Fine. You keep your pension, but you're banned from airline work. Banned. Victoria's voice rose. For life, for life. No. Victoria stood up, pacing the small cell. I want to fight this. I want a lawyer. A real lawyer. Someone who can take on Apex Airlines and win. Frank closed his briefcase. Then you're on your own. The union can't back you on this. You filed a false police report. That's not a labor dispute. That's criminal. He walked away. Victoria sat back down on the bench. She thought about her apartment, her cat, her pension, her 18 years of service. And then she thought about the look on Marcus Williams' face when the handcuffs clicked shut. She smiled. This wasn't over. Back at Gate B-47, Riley Santos stood behind the podium for the first time as lead agent. Her hands were still shaking, but her voice was steady. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now ready to resume boarding for Flight 614 to Houston. We apologize for the delay. All passengers will receive a $200 voucher as compensation. We will now begin boarding with first class and our Diamond Elite members. The passengers moved forward, calm now, grateful. The tension had broken. Riley scanned boarding passes with a smile. A real smile. Not the tight, forced smile Victoria had taught her to use. A genuine expression of welcome. The young mother with the baby approached. I'm so sorry about earlier. Riley said it before the woman could speak. You and your baby can board now. Take your time." The mother's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you." As the plane filled, Captain Elena Ruiz stood at the cockpit door watching. She had flown for Apex Airlines for 12 years. She had seen the good and the bad, the moments of grace and the moments of cruelty. But she had never seen anything like tonight. She pulled out her phone and sent a text to Harold Mitchell. "Flight 614 departing on time. All passengers boarded. Riley Santos is doing great. You made the right call." Harold's response came 30 seconds later. "Thank you, Captain. Safe flight." Elena pocketed her phone and returned to the cockpit. At 9:47 p.m., Flight 614 pushed back from Gate B47. On time. Full. Every passenger accounted for. Except one. Dr. Marcus Williams was 30,000 feet above Pennsylvania, sitting in a leather chair on a private jet flying toward Dallas with the CEO of Apex Airlines. And the real confrontation hadn't even started yet. The Apex Airlines corporate jet was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that pressed against your eardrums and made you hyper-aware of every breath. Marcus sat across from Harold Mitchell in a cabin designed for executives and diplomats. Cream-colored leather seats, a polished mahogany table between them, soft lighting that didn't quite hide the tension. Nina Patel sat at the back of the cabin typing furiously on her laptop, pulling together files and video clips and building the case they'd present to the board in less than 12 hours. Harold sipped his coffee. He looked tired. The kind of tired that came from carrying the weight of 10,000 employees and a billion-dollar company on your shoulders. Dr. Williams. Harold set down his cup. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest." Marcus looked up. "Okay. When you stood at that podium tonight when Victoria was profiling you when she took your ID and questioned your ticket, what were you thinking?" Marcus leaned back in his chair. He thought about it, really thought about it. "I was thinking that if I raised my voice, I'd prove her right. If I got angry, I'd become the threat she already saw. So I stayed calm. Not because I'm a saint, because I've learned that the only way to win is to let them show the world who they really are." Harold nodded slowly. "That's what I thought. And that's why I need you in that boardroom tomorrow. Because the board is going to try to spin this. They're going to say Victoria was one bad apple, an isolated incident, a personnel issue, and if I'm the only one telling them otherwise, they'll dismiss it. But if you're there, if they see you, if they hear your story, they can't ignore it." Marcus looked out the window. The lights of cities passed below like constellations. "What do you want me to say?" "The truth." Harold's voice was steady. "Just tell them what happened. Tell them how it felt. Tell them why it matters. And if they don't listen," Harold smiled. A small, dangerous smile. "Then we take it public. Every video, every witness statement, every piece of evidence. We let the world decide." Nina looked up from her laptop. "Sir, the board is not going to like that. I don't care what they like." Harold's voice was sharp. "I care about doing the right thing. And if that means burning down 18 years of carefully managed PR, so be it." Marcus felt something shift in his chest. A weight lifting. A door opening. "Okay. I'll do it." Harold extended his hand across the table. Marcus shook it. "Good. Now get some rest. We land in Dallas at midnight, and tomorrow morning we change everything." The Apex Airlines headquarters in Dallas was a gleaming tower of glass and steel rising 43 stories above the Texas skyline. The boardroom was on the top floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows. A table that seated 20. Leather chairs that cost more than most people's cars. At 9 a.m. on a Wednesday morning, 12 board members filed in. They wore suits that cost thousands. They carried briefcases made of Italian leather. They moved with the confidence of people who had never been told no. At the head of the table sat Theodore Langston, the board chair. 68 years old, old money, fourth-generation wealth, A man who believed that problems could be solved with lawyers and PR firms and carefully worded press releases. Harold Mitchell sat at the opposite end of the table. He wore a suit today, navy blue, tailored, professional, but his eyes were hard. Next to Harold sat Dr. Marcus Williams, still in his hoodie, still in his joggers. Harold had insisted, "Show them exactly what Victoria saw." The board members glanced at Marcus, confused, uncomfortable. Who was this man? Why was he here? Why was he dressed like that? "Good morning." Harold's voice cut through the murmurs. "Thank you for coming on short notice. Before we begin quarterly earnings, we have an urgent matter. Last night, one of our gate agents filed a false police report, racially profiled a passenger, and endangered lives. Dr. Marcus Williams is here to give his first-hand account." Theodore Langston frowned. He set down his pen. "Harold, with all due respect, one gate agent's mistake doesn't require board time. HR can handle this. We have a fiduciary duty to our shareholders not to micromanage personnel disputes." Harold didn't blink. "Theodore, the video has 12 million views. CNN, MSNBC, Fox News are all calling. The hashtag is trending #1 on Twitter. This is not a personnel dispute. This is an existential threat to the company." Langston sighed. "Fine. Dr. Williams, please proceed, but keep it brief. We have a full agenda." Marcus stood. He didn't have notes. He didn't have a PowerPoint. He just had his story. And he told it. He described walking up to the podium, being told he didn't belong, having his ID examined like a forgery, being made to step aside while other passengers boarded, being threatened with arrest, being called aggressive for asking questions. He described the fear when the police arrived, the instinct to drop to his knees, the knowledge that one wrong move could be fatal. And he described the moment Harold Mitchell stood up and refused to let it continue. The boardroom was silent. Marcus sat down. Langston cleared his throat. "Dr. Williams, I'm sorry this happened. Truly. But Victoria Ashford has an 18-year exemplary record. Perhaps there was a miscommunication. Perhaps tensions were high. Perhaps there's video." Marcus's voice was quiet. "Would you like to see it?" Langston hesitated. "That won't be necessary." I'm sure Harold stood. He picked up a remote, pointed it at the screen on the wall. "I think we should watch it. All of it." He pressed play. The screen came to life. Split screen. 3 angles. Brandon Cole's live stream from the seating area. Sophie Martinez's vlog camera from the side, and the gate camera footage, the official Apex Airlines security feed, crystal clear, high-definition audio, perfect. The board watched in silence. They saw Victoria sneer at Marcus. "People like you always try to sneak into first class." They saw her examine his ID like it was fake, saw her refuse to scan his boarding pass, saw her make him step aside while others boarded. They saw Harold stand up, saw him identify himself, saw Victoria laugh and call his ID fake. They saw Victoria grab the phone, dial 911, and lie. "This is Apex Airlines Gate B47. I have 2 men attempting to breach security. They are aggressive. They have weapons. Send SWAT." The camera angle showed Marcus and Harold standing 6 feet away, hands visible, clearly unarmed, no threat, no weapons, nothing. Victoria hung up. She smiled, a triumphant, manic smile. The video ended. The screen went black. The silence in the boardroom was absolute. Robert Hayes, the CFO, was pale. "Oh my God." Lisa Monroe, the general counsel, had her hand over her mouth. "That's a felony. That's federal false reporting." Carlos Ruiz, the VP of operations, shook his head. She could have gotten them killed. A SWAT team doesn't ask questions. Theodore Langston stared at the blank screen. His jaw was tight. His hands were folded on the table. "Harold." His voice was quiet. I had no idea it was this blatant. "This is why I brought Dr. Williams." Harold's voice was steady. "So you'd understand this isn't an HR issue. This is a company-wide crisis." Marcus leaned forward. "Mr. Langston, members of the board, I don't want Victoria's pension. I don't want to sue. I want you to understand something. I'm a neurosurgeon. I save lives. But last night I was treated like a criminal because of a hoodie. How many passengers has Victoria done this to who didn't have a CEO watching? How many people just swallowed it and moved on? How many passengers have we lost because they were humiliated at our gates and decided never to fly Apex again? You have a chance to change this. Not with sensitivity training, not with apologies, with systems, with accountability, with tools that make it impossible for the next Victoria to erase someone." The board members looked at each other, uncomfortable, shifting in their seats. Lisa Monroe spoke first. "Dr. Williams is right. We can't just fire Victoria and move on. We need structural change." "What are you suggesting?" Langston's voice was tight. "Cameras." Lisa ticked off points on her fingers. "Every gate podium, audio and video, retained for 90 days, random audits, independent oversight." Carlos Ruiz nodded. "And an anonymous reporting system. Passengers and employees both. Something that bypasses HR and goes straight to executive leadership." Robert Hayes looked at his spreadsheet. "That's expensive. Very expensive." "Not as expensive as a lawsuit," Lisa shot back. "Or a DOJ investigation. Or a boycott." Harold stood. He walked to the window, looked out at the Dallas skyline. "Here's what we're going to do." His voice was calm, commanding. "We're implementing everything Lisa and Carlos just said. Cameras, reporting system, oversight. And we're creating a new position. Chief Equity Officer. Reports directly to me. Has authority to ground flights, fire staff, audit any complaint. No HR filter. No bureaucracy." Langston frowned. "Harold, that's a lot of power to give one person." "Good." Harold turned to face the board. "Because one person just weaponized a 911 system to target a passenger based on his skin color. We need someone with equal power to stop it." "Who would even take that job?" Hayes asked. Marcus spoke quietly. "I know someone. Dr. Jasmine Cole, aviation psychologist, studies implicit bias in transportation. She's brilliant, and she won't pull punches." Harold nodded. "Set up the meeting." Langston sighed. He looked at the board members, saw the nods, the reluctant agreement. "Fine. Make it happen. But Harold, this better work. It will." Harold's voice was steel. "Or I'll find a board that will make it work." The board went into executive session. Harold and Marcus stepped out into the hallway. Nina Patel was waiting with her tablet. "Sir, the press is outside. Cameras everywhere. They want a statement." "Not yet." Harold checked his watch. "Let's see what the board decides first." 45 minutes later, the boardroom doors opened. Theodore Langston stepped out. He looked 10 years older. "Dr. Williams, please come back in." Marcus and Harold entered. The board members were standing now, no longer sitting in their expensive chairs. They looked humbled, shaken. Langston spoke. "Doctor, on behalf of this board, I apologize. You're right. This is bigger than Victoria Ashford. This is about our culture, our systems, our failures." Lisa Monroe stepped forward. We're implementing immediate changes. First, all gate podiums nationwide will have biometric cameras with audio. Footage retained 90 days. Second, we're launching the Passenger Protection Portal. Mobile app. Anyone can report discrimination in real time. Anonymous. Reports go directly to executive team. Third, gate agents will no longer have unilateral power to deny boarding. All refusals must be approved by duty manager with documented cause. Carlos Ruiz added, "And we're funding the Chief Equity Officer position. Full budget, full authority. Dr. Cole. If she accepts, we'll have my full support." Harold spoke. "And I'm making one more change. Every executive in this company, including board members, will spend 1 day per quarter working a frontline position. Gate agent, baggage handler, ticket counter. You want to understand this company? Understand it from the ground up." Langston's face tightened. "Harold, that's non-negotiable." Harold's voice was final. "You want my resignation? You can have it. But if I stay, this is how we do business." Langston looked at the other board members. Saw the writing on the wall. "Fine. We'll do it your way." Harold turned to Marcus. "Doctor, thank you. For your courage. For your patience. For standing your ground when most people would have walked away." Marcus shook his hand. "Don't thank me yet. Thank me when the changes stick. When the next black doctor in a hoodie boards without a second glance. Deal." That evening, Marcus stood in the backyard of his childhood home in Houston. The sun was setting. The grill was smoking. The yard was full of family. His mother, Gloria Williams, walked up to him. She was 65, retired teacher, strong hands, kind eyes. She pulled Marcus into a hug. "Baby, I saw the news. Are you okay?" Marcus nodded. "I'm fine, Mama. Better than fine." Gloria pulled back, looked at him. "You stood up, just like I taught you." "But I was scared when I saw those police." "I know." Marcus's voice was thick. "But I wasn't alone. And now it means something." His cousin Terrence ran over. "Man, you went viral. My whole timeline is you. #StandWithMarcus. You're famous." Aunt Lorraine, 62, put her hand on Marcus's shoulder. "That woman. That Victoria. The way she looked at you. I've seen that look my whole life. I'm glad she finally faced consequences." Uncle Raymond, 70, a retired Army sergeant, shook Marcus's hand. "Son, you did what a lot of us couldn't. You didn't flinch. Proud of you." Marcus looked around at his family. 3 generations. Teachers, nurses, veterans, students. People who had fought their own battles, swallowed their own humiliations, carried their own scars. "This is why I didn't walk away." Marcus said it quietly. "Not for me. For every person in this yard who's been told they don't belong. We belong everywhere." Gloria kissed his forehead. "Yes, we do." 3 weeks later, Harold Mitchell stood at a podium in the Apex Airlines Press Center. Behind him, a giant screen displayed the interface of a new mobile app. Clean, simple, powerful, Apex Guardian. The room was packed with reporters, cameras, microphones. The story had grown beyond a viral video. It had become a national conversation about discrimination in travel, about who gets believed, about who gets second-guessed. Harold began. 3 weeks ago, Dr. Marcus Williams was racially profiled at our gate. He was threatened. He was humiliated. And we failed him. The room was silent. This isn't about Victoria Ashford. This is about the thousands of passengers who never had a CEO standing behind them, who swallowed the humiliation, who missed flights, who just wanted to go home. Harold gestured to the screen. Apex Guardian launches today. Real-time passenger protection. Every gate interaction recorded. Anonymous reporting. Transparent accountability. It's not just an app. It's a promise. We're watching. We're listening. And we're accountable. Dr. Marcus Williams stepped up to the podium. He didn't speak long. The system that protects one person protects everyone. Make sure yours does. The press applauded. Harold introduced the next speaker. Dr. Jasmine Cole, 36, African American. Aviation psychologist. Sharp eyes. Sharper mind. I'm proud to serve as Apex's first Chief Equity Officer. We're not just changing policy. We're changing culture. Starting today, implicit bias training is mandatory for all customer-facing staff. Not once, annually, and it's not a video. And it's live facilitation where people tell their stories. The screen behind her displayed statistics. Week 1, Apex Guardian downloads 890,000. User reports submitted 1,247. Gate agents disciplined 34. Policy violations corrected in real time 156. Riley Santos stepped onto the stage. Now lead agent at Gate B47, confident, poised. I was terrified of Victoria. I watched her humiliate people for years. I didn't speak up because I thought one person couldn't change anything. Dr. Williams showed me I was wrong. If you see something, say something, please. The press conference ended. The cameras stopped rolling, but the work had just begun. 2 weeks after her arrest, Victoria Ashford sat in a conference room at the law offices of Vane and Associates. Her attorney, Leonard Vane, 62 personal injury specialist, sat across from her with a folder full of documents. Victoria, we need to talk about your case. Victoria leaned forward. Good. When do we file? I want $50 million. Wrongful termination. Defamation. Emotional distress. They humiliated me on national television. Leonard sighed. He opened the folder, pulled out a stack of printed screenshots. Social media posts, news articles, video stills. Victoria. They have 18 minutes of uncut footage. 3 camera angles. You can see everything, hear everything. And the 911 call is the nail in the coffin, so what I felt threatened. Leonard slid a document across the table. This is the DA's offer. Plead guilty to misdemeanor false reporting. 6 months probation, 200 hours community service, $5,000 fine. You keep your pension, but you're banned from airline employment. Victoria stared at the paper. No, I want to fight. If you fight, they upgrade the charge to felony false reporting. That's up to 3 years in prison. Leonard's voice was flat. I've seen the evidence. You'll lose. Victoria's hands trembled. So you're saying I have no choice. You have a choice. Take the deal or risk prison. But Victoria, there's no scenario where you win this. Victoria signed the deal the next day. 6 months later, she worked as an administrative assistant at a small law firm. Salary $38,000. Down from $67,000 at Apex. Her LinkedIn profile listed her location as seeking new opportunities. She declined all interview requests. 3 months after the incident, Marcus flew again. Medical conference in Boston. He booked first class. JFK to Logan. He walked into Terminal 5 wearing scrubs. He'd come straight from surgery. He approached Gate B47. Riley Santos stood behind the podium. She saw him. Her face lit up. Dr. Williams. Welcome back. Marcus smiled. Riley, how's it going? Different. Better. The cameras changed everything. Agents know they're being watched. Behavior shifted overnight. Riley scanned his boarding pass. You're in 3A today. Captain Ruiz is flying you again. Marcus boarded, settled into his seat. The cabin filled. Passengers smiled at him. Some recognized him from the news. The PA system crackled. Captain Elena Ruiz's voice came through. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Ruiz. Before we push back, I want to recognize a special passenger. Dr. Marcus Williams is with us today. Because of his courage, this airline is safer and fairer for everyone. Thank you, Doctor. Spontaneous applause. Marcus waved it off, tears in his eyes. A flight attendant, Jessica Park, 27, Asian American, stopped by his seat. Dr. Williams, I just want to say thank you. I've been flying 5 years. Before Apex Guardian, I saw so much bias but felt powerless. Now we have tools. Thank you. Marcus looked at her. You had the power all along. You just needed permission to use it. The plane lifted off. City lights faded below. Marcus closed his eyes. Mama was right. You don't change things by being quiet. You change them by refusing to disappear. Look, I need to be real with you for a minute. I've been running this channel for 8 years. I've told hundreds of stories about people who stood up when the world told them to sit down. But this one hit different. Because Marcus Williams did something most of us can't do. He stayed calm when every instinct screamed at him to fight back. He stayed composed when his dignity was being stripped away in front of strangers. And he didn't do it because he's a saint. He did it because he knew the moment he raised his voice, the moment he let anger take over the narrative would shift. He'd become the aggressor, the threat, the problem. And that's the exhausting reality so many of you live with every single day. I created this channel because I got tired of watching good people swallow their pain just to avoid making a scene. I got tired of seeing talented, qualified, brilliant human beings shrink themselves to fit into spaces where they were never meant to be small. Marcus could have walked away. He could have taken the next flight, written an angry email, and moved on with his life. But he stood there. Not because he wanted to be a hero, because he was tired. Tired of the assumptions. Tired of the profiling. Tired of being invisible in first class and hypervisible at the security checkpoint. And here's what I want you to understand. Harold Mitchell didn't save Marcus. Marcus saved himself by refusing to become what Victoria expected him to be. Harold just had the power to make sure that refusal mattered. But power isn't always a CEO in a bomber jacket. Sometimes power is a 26-year-old gate agent named Riley, who finally said, "No, that's not what happened." Sometimes power is a vlogger with a phone camera who refused to look away. Sometimes power is you reading this comment section, sharing this story, refusing to let it fade into algorithm obscurity. If you've ever been Victoria'd, if you've ever had someone look at your ticket, your ID, your face, and still question whether you belong, I want to hear from you. Not for sympathy, for the record. Because these stories don't just validate us. They build case files. They warn the next Victoria that we're watching, that we have cameras, that we have voices, that we're not going away. Here's what I learned from Marcus. Your composure is not weakness. It's strategy. It's survival. It's the most powerful weapon you have when the world expects you to break. Your patience is not surrender. It's collecting evidence. Every second you stay calm is another second the truth has room to breathe. Your silence is not acceptance. It's choosing your moment. Marcus didn't argue with Victoria. He let her reveal herself. And when it mattered, when the cameras were rolling and the CEO was watching, the truth did the talking for him. So here's my challenge to you. If this story made you feel something, if it reminded you of your own airport, your own gate agent, your own moment of being judged by the package instead of the person, don't just hit like. Don't just subscribe. Though please do both, because that's how this channel grows and we get to tell more of these stories. But also share it. Send it to someone who needs to know they're not alone. Drop it in a group chat. Post it on your timeline with your story attached. Because when we share, we don't just heal. We arm the next person who walks up to that podium. We remind them you belong in that first-class seat. You earned it. And if someone tells you otherwise, there's an army of us with cameras and voices and truth on our side. Until next time, keep your head up. keep your receipts ready and never ever let them make you small. Now get in these comments and tell me your story. I'm listening.